Alright, today's lesson for Algebra 2 is lesson number 75. We're talking about completing the square, specifically for ellipses here. So we're going to complete the square in order to convert the equation of an ellipse into standard form. Okay, so we did this with circles. Since we already did it with circles, instead of doing like the exact same thing, it's a little bit more challenging because there's just a little bit of an extra step, but it's really very similar to what we did with circles. So first thing you're going to want to do is move all the constants to the right side of the equation and any x and y terms to the left. Then you're going to organize each set of x and y terms and factor out the a term if it's not equal to 1. Okay, then you'll complete the square for the x terms, then for the y terms, and you'll factor and simplify to obtain the standard form equation for an ellipse. So I think we really need an example to go along with this step, so let's focus on 1 and 2. First thing I want to do is move my constants to the right side, so that means I'm going to add 100 to both sides of the equation here. That gives me x squared plus 4y equals 100. And the next step would be to organize each set of x and y terms, but I only have one thing that has to do with an x and only one thing that has to do with a y, so I don't really have to organize them. My a term is 4 with y squared, but it's already kind of factored out. There's nothing else that has to do with y. Then completing the square, these are both squared terms. There's no what we call linear terms, so there's not like a 5x or a 18y. Okay, so we can't really complete the square here. So we'll just try to get this into standard form then. Standard form for an ellipse, it has to equal 1. So we're going to divide the everything in the equation by 100 to get 1 on the right-hand side. So we'll divide this by 100 and the left side by 100. That gives us x squared over 100 plus 4y squared over 100 equals 1. X squared over 100 we just leave. The 4 and 100 can be simplified just to 25 in the denominator. So we get x squared over 100 plus y squared over 25 equals 1 as our final standard form equation here. Okay, then moving on to number 2. This is a little more complicated, but it's still doable. This will just actually use the completing the square method. So first thing we want to do is move the constant over to the right side. So I'll subtract 6, then rewrite my equation. So I'm organizing, putting my x's first, then the y's, and then I have the constant on the other side. Now I'm going to do the next step, which is to factor out the a. So since a is not 1, right, the coefficient with my squared term is 7. So I want to factor that out here. Factoring it from 7x squared gives me just x squared. If I factor out the 7 from 112x, that'll give me 16x. And then I want to leave a space here to complete the square. Okay, so we'll leave a space with parentheses and a squared term just like we did for the circle. Okay, now for the y's, I have 17. I'm going to factor that out. I'm left with y squared here. And then 102y divided by 17 gives me a plus 6y. And I'm going to leave space here again and have that be equal to negative 6. Okay, now I'm thinking of what I need to go in the parentheses. I need to take half of 16. So half of 16, that's just 8. So I'll have 8 in these parentheses here. Since I'm adding 8 squared, I'm adding 64. But really those parentheses are all being multiplied by 7. So I'm adding 64 times 7. Okay, so 64 times 7, I need to do that scratch work. That gives me 448. So I add that to the other side. And now I'm looking at the side with at the y's, excuse me, so the y's, my b there is 6, half of 6 is 3. So I have my c term, I'm using 3 squared. 3 squared is 9, but I'm really multiplying that by 17, so I have to do a side problem here of 17 times 9. That gives me 153, so I add that as well. Okay, so then from here I'm going to look at each of these sets. So I'll look at the x's and use completing the square to turn this into the perfect square binomial here. So it's 7 times x plus 8 squared, right? I just drop those down. And then same thing for y, I have that 17 there still, and what's in the inside the parentheses can be factored to x plus 3 squared. Okay, then on the right hand excuse me, on the right hand side I just need to add those together. Negative 6 and positive 448 will give me positive 442. 442 plus 153 is 595. I still need a 1 on the right hand side, so I'm going to divide this whole equation by 595. I'll divide each piece separately. And then simplify each of those fractions. So this becomes x plus 8 squared. And then 7 goes into 595 85 times. And you would do a side problem just to figure that out. And then same thing with the y's. I can simplify. I'm left with y plus 3 squared. And then 17 goes into 595 35 times. Okay, and then 595 divided by 595 is just 1. Okay. So this would be my standard form equation. I could tell things from this like where the center is, right? So my center would be negative 8, negative 3. I know since 85 is bigger than 35 that my major axis is horizontal. I could use these values to find the foci. I would subtract to find the length of C and then go along the major axis that many in either direction to find the coordinates of the two foci. So a lot of information once we have it in standard form. Okay, and moving on now to number 3. Similar process here. I would start by these two, 3 and 4 are both kind of like example 1. Okay, so I start, they're a little simpler, so I just basically add the constant to the other side. After doing that, I'm left with x squared plus 16y squared equals 144. I need a 1 though on the right, so I divide everything by 144. X squared over 144, I can't simplify, it's done, and then the 16 goes into 144 9 times. So I'm left with this as my final standard form equation. Okay, number 4, I need to add 64 to both sides. And then I have x squared plus 4y squared equals 64, but I need 1 on the right, so I'll divide everything by 64. That gives me x squared over 64. 4 goes into 64 16 times, so I have x squared over 64 plus y squared over 16 equals 1. Okay, moving on to 5 and 6. 5 and 6 are going to be like example number 2. Okay, so these are a little bit longer, a little more involved, but that's okay. So first thing for number 5, again, we just move the constant to the other side. We're going to rewrite this, organizing the x's together, then the y's. And I'm going to factor out the a term now. So my x's, I need to complete the square there, but I have a 4 in front of my x squared, so I need to factor out the 4. That gives me x squared minus 12x inside the parentheses, and I'll leave space to complete the square there. Then I have 9y squared. I'm already done with that. I don't really need to do anything because it's already a square. I just have to worry about that 9 later on. Okay, so for now I'll complete the square for the x's. I have negative 12 as my b, so half of that is negative 6. That makes this whole thing, first, since I'm adding 6 inside the parentheses on the left side over here, it's really 6 squared, which is 36, but it's in another set of parentheses that are being multiplied by 4, so it's really 36 times 4, which is 144. So I'm adding that to the right hand side as well. Okay, this drops down, the 4 stays, and I have this quantity, I have a binomial squared, which is just going to be x minus 6. The 9y squared is still there, and negative 108 plus 144 is 36. So I'm going to divide everything by 36. Okay, the x's reduce, so I have x minus 6 squared over 9. And then with the y's, that fraction reduces so that I have y squared over 4 equals 1. Okay, number 6. Again, number 6 and like number 2 are really the most difficult that it will get as far as number of steps, I guess, because they both have an x squared, a y squared, an x, and a y. Okay, so there's just naturally a little bit more work there, but it's nothing too crazy, okay? So first I move the constant over, then I rewrite these with the x's first, x squared, and then the x, and the y squared, and then the y. I'm going to factor out the a term for each of these, so I'll have 45 times something, right? I'm going to factor that out of the x's and complete the square there. And I'm going to factor out the 25 from the y's and complete the square there. And I'll have negative 116 plus some other stuff on the right-hand side. Okay, of course, x squared and y squared I know are going here. And then I need to factor. So 294x right here, I'm going to divide that by 49, right? I'm factoring out this 49 from that 294x. Doing that gives me 6x. Okay, and then I am going to leave space here for my b over 2 squared, okay, to complete the square. Half of 6 is just 3, so that's what goes in the parentheses there. With the 25, I had y squared. Now I'm looking at 300y, factoring out 25. That gives me plus 12y. And then I need to complete the square with the y's. In the parentheses there is going to be half of 12, which is just 6. Okay, this drops down. But before that, I need to make sure that I'm adding everything that I need to on the right-hand side. So I know I did 3 squared is 9, but that's inside parentheses being multiplied by 49. So 49 times 9 makes me add 441. Okay, and then with the y's, I had 6 squared, which is 36, but times 25. So 36 times 25 is going to be 900 even. Adding those together in the next step. Okay, so I have 49, and then the trinomial factors to x plus 3 squared, 25, and then that trinomial factors to y plus 6 squared. And adding those numbers, I get 1,225. Okay, but I need 1 on the right, so I'll divide everything by that. The 49 over 1,225 reduces, so I have x plus 3 squared over 25. And the 25 into 1,225 reduces, so that I have y plus 6 squared over 49. And of course, 1,225 divided by itself is just 1. Alright, so those are some examples. Some of them can get a little bit longer, as you see, like in this one, but even then it's really 1, 2, 3 steps before the final answer. So it's nothing too bad, just a little bit of writing involved. Okay, so if you want some more practice before the homework, or if you're getting stuck, this is a good place to start. So work on these 6 problems, and then, or pause the video, work on these 6 problems, and then check your answers. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the answer slide, and this is what you should have gotten if you did those problems. Okay, so none of these were too crazy bad. On homework you may have some of the more difficult ones. Okay. All right, well that is it for this lesson then. Thank you, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.